Hey, what's going on, everyone? I know what you're thinking. This is an endgame lesson and you hate endgames. Well, I hate endgames too, but unfortunately, if you want to get to that master level, if you want to break 2000, if you want to get to that 2500, even beyond that 2700, well, you need to know endgames, you need to know them inside and out. It's going to get to a point where you can no longer beat your opponents in the opening and the middle game, and the game is going to progress into the endgame, and you need to know what to do in order to win. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a very simple concept, and that's going to be the rule of the square. It's going to allow you to very rapidly and easily calculate whether your pawn can get to the other side of the board and to the queen square without having the other king capture it, or in the other way around. It's going to allow you to see if you're on the defensive end of this, if you can get to the pawn in time in order to save the game. Once we have this concept down and we understand it very well, we're going to move on into this example here where it is black to play, and we're going to break it down into everything. Should we trade pieces? Whose pawn's quicker? Is this pawn getting there before this one? Is this king inside the square to capture the white pawn? Is the white king inside the square to capture the black pawn? We're going to take a look at all of this. So let's get started. I first want to introduce to you the rule of the square. And the rule of the square just means that as we advance the pawn, if we make a perfect square, if our opponent's king is outside the square, it cannot reach our pawn, and we're going to be able to get a queen and win the game. Now, on the other hand, if our opponent's king can, on his move, get inside the square, then he will be able to capture the pawn. He will be able to get to the pawn with enough time to take it. So let's see what this looks like. It is white to play here, and we're going to make this move forward 2 spaces. Now, in order to make a perfect square, we have to count how many spaces are from here to our queen square. So if we do this, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So then we're going to count 4 spaces to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to make a nice little square here. And as you can see by the arrows and the circles, we have a square, and this king is outside the square. If we were to move right now, it will still be outside the square. And this is what we want. If our opponent on his move cannot get inside the square, then our pawn runs and he cannot capture it. Let's keep going. The king moves, pawn moves forward, again 3 spaces, so we're going to make quickly a square here, and you can see that this king is still outside. It cannot get in. If we keep going, the king moves, pawn keeps moving. Now our square is very small. Still, this king is outside. And guys, the idea here is that this is going to save you a lot of time in your calculations. You don't need to calculate this. You simply, in your head, draw a square, and if the king is outside, you move, period. You don't need to calculate anything. You don't need to be like pawn here, king there, pawn there, because if you do that, sometimes you get lost in your own thoughts. This is very simple concept. You make the square. If the king is outside, it's game over. We win. Here, we're just gonna go ahead, finish it up. We're gonna get a queen. We're going to, with this queen, checkmate the king, and it's gonna be game over. All right, now let's go back to the original position, because I want to show you guys another example here. Remember, we moved 2 spaces forward. So what happens if we were to only move 1 space forward here? If we move only 1 space, let's quickly draw the squares again. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we make a square here now, notice something. It is black to move. And once it does, it is going to get inside the square. So if we only move 1 space and not 2 spaces, then black would have been able to save the game. This game could just continue. Well, black moves, we make a move. Again, we move. And okay, now that we're a little bit closer, let's draw a square again, just so that you understand what we mean. This king is again able to get inside the square. Any of these 2 squares will be fine. We make another move forward. And as you can see, this king is able to reach the pawn, and once we get a queen, then this king will just take the queen and it will be a draw. All right, I hope you guys understand this, and if you don't, just pause the video, go back, watch it again, and let's move on to this beautiful example here. It is black to play. If you notice something, black is down on exchange, but this bishop is spinning this rook, so material is practically even. Both sides have an outside pawn, and this pawn's on a2, this pawn's on h5, this one is more advanced. Now, what we want to know in this situation is, should black continue to trade pieces? Should black not continue, but should black trade all the pieces and go for the endgame in which both sides will have one pawn? Or should black continue putting pressure and keep some pieces on the board in order to keep the winning chances going? Well, if you quickly, without having to analyze any of that, quickly look at where this king is and where this pawn is, if we draw the square here, notice something. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we draw this square very quickly, we can see that this white king is outside the square. So we don't need to calculate anything else. We know that if all the pieces in this position disappear from the board, we're simply going to win because our pawn is way too fast. This white king cannot get there in time. So how do we accomplish this in this exact position? Well, we give a check. Here on a3, the king moves, and we're going to trade all the pieces. And once the king takes, the pawn moves. Notice our new square here. This king is outside. It cannot reach our pawn, and we're just going to win this game. Guys, hope this was clear. It is a very easy concept to understand. Once you know it, you'll never forget it. Hope you liked the video. As always, stay safe, have a great day, show respect to your opponent. See you on the next one.